Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me on today's edition of the 6 p.m. Primetime Newscast. For presentation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. High tides and overflowing rivers in Idabato, the division of the Southwest region, has resulted to the destruction of 3 government schools, a newly constructed hospital, and several houses, leaving victims stranded. Locals say the damages is threatening development efforts. And still in the Southwest region, taxi drivers of the Boya municipality are demanding justice for their colleague who was brutally murdered and his car taken away by unknown persons. The drivers stormed the streets of Boya today, denouncing the numerous atrocities recorded in the area while expressing fears about the security of drivers and the entire population. Those are major stories. Stay with us for details and more. Thank you so much for staying with us on today's edition of the 6 p.m. Primetime Newscast. Circulation was partially perturbed in Boya as taxi drivers had a peaceful protest to ask for justice for their colleague who was killed on Wednesday night. The drivers during their protest requested that the local authorities should protect them against the unknown. Magic and Gabriel reports about that protest march.
On the streets of Boya, taxi drivers hold their fellow colleagues to stop walking, while others were spotted brandishing messages like, "We say no to brutal killings, no to kidnap and abduction, we are patriotic citizens and don't want war," and a host of other messages.
Where we are in the crisis. Anything we do, we need to be very, very careful. So we are gathered here because of what has happened like yesterday night, breaking morning. We are just pleading the law and order that is come and help us, because what is happening we don't know. Like, I'm a driver, I don't know what can happen with you tomorrow. That's why we are gathered here. We are not gathered here because of one forces or the other. No, we are one mouth, one peace. That's all we want. So what is happening now is that like they are fighting us. We don't know why they are fighting us. So we are begging the forces and other to come and please help us and solve this situation we have.
The outing made by taxi drivers this Friday in Boya comes after one of their colleagues, Brandon, was killed on Wednesday night, breaking Thursday at UB's second gate by unknown persons who had hired him and took away his taxi.
The people that have been killed on daily basis, they are taxi people. So this morning ceremony is going on only towards or within taxi people. So that's why we are stopping taxis. They should come and be, because a songwriter said no one knows tomorrow. Today may be me, tomorrow may be you. So if they call for this kind of peaceful negotiation, peaceful dialogue among ourselves in our sector, we should come out massively. That's why you see me as a president, I'm there with my boys and the other colleagues, that we should come out massively.
For one of the presidents of the Taxi Drivers Union in Boya, Denis Misumbe, the day was also reserved for the taxi drivers to mourn for their colleagues who had passed on as a result of the crisis.
We had a program, us the taxi drivers, to mourn our colleagues, and the occasion was supposed to start at 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. We make an arrangement with pastors and some fathers in different churches for them to come and pray and bless us for those kind of rubbish that is being like a kind of what that is in us, who is taking us one bit by bit. So that's why we are here.
Due to the action of the taxi drivers in Boya this Friday, the town of Boya was partially paralyzed. The taxi drivers are begging on the local authorities to protect them because they are also peace crusaders. The taxi drivers, after having a peaceful dialogue with Police Commissioner Ndumbe, will finally decide to resume their activities in the town of legendary hospitality.
And still in the southwest region, at least 3 government schools, a newly constructed hospital and civil houses have been washed away by water waves in Idapato, that is in the Dan division, that part of the country. Locals complain this situation and persistent water crisis has made life extremely difficult for them. We have details on the suffering of the population of Idapato in this report compiled by Malaglory.
We are in Idapato, a locality in the southwest region. Most people living here are Nigerians. They complain that their major challenge is the destruction of their houses, schools and a newly constructed hospital by water waves. A situation that is coming to make life more difficult for the inhabitants that have been suffering from water crisis in the past years.
Challenges that we are facing here in this subdivision. One, it is how water is removing the houses of people, which they use money to do it, and such as these hospitals here. It was a very mighty and a wonderful investment which government has provided for us, but eventually the waves and waters just remove it, destroy it. Schools, about 3 schools which has been built by government.
We have a water crisis during the dry season. We have a very difficulty before we can get a good water to drink. Without us taking our boats to Kondo Titi or Munimba or Equinoxe, we cannot get a good water to drink.
In a way to relieve the population from their suffering, the local authorities have engaged in the construction of an embankment around the sea to stop the rising tides from coming close to the buildings. To complete these and other projects in the municipality, more funds are needed.
Like a bridge crossing Amamong at Ankombo Amoya is also a priority. I can say for now we need a fund to completely protect our municipality, embankment, and accessible route. Any other project can come after.
Over 3 government schools, the lone hospital in Idapato destroyed. Some inhabitants are stranded as their houses have been washed away by the water waves. They hope the authorities will do more efforts to secure their lives and provide them with potable water.
And the problem of absence of portable water in Kumba might soon be the thing of the past. After Equinoxe TV took interest in the water crisis in Kumba, officials of the Water Utility Corporation affirmed that some pipes are defective and will be arranged soonest. Anabila comes back to the water crisis experienced by the population of Kumba.
For some time now, the local population of Kumba has been complaining of consuming water of doubtful quality. Recently in K-Town, water that flows from taps, according to the locals, has a smell, is tasty, and has a color. Equinoxe Television went finding out what the people have been going through with access to potable water.
We have been experiencing bad water consumption, and on every daily basis we consume water. So it is bad.
The report on Equinoxe News caught the attention of the senior divisional officer for the Meme, who immediately in turn alerted officials of the Water Utilities Corporation in Kumba.
Where the population are complaining that water they are receiving is not best quality.
During a visit to Calm Water in Kumba, the Deputy General Director affirmed that some pipes are defective and should be adjusted soonest.
Explain the water problem we will get to.
We are explaining the water crisis we have in Kumba. Calm Water is to distribute potable water to the local population, but in Kumba some 2 filters were blocked, reason water wasn't clean. Even in Lake Barombi, there is a pipe that has a leakage. That also will have to be fixed. Consuming dirty water has long and short-term negative effects on the health of the people. Dirty water exposes the locals to several waterborne diseases like cholera, dysentery and typhoid. The people of Kumba are hopeful that the destroyed pipes be fixed and soonest so they can once again have access to potable water.
And away from news from the southwest region, some social media influencers in Ivory Coast are calling on the government of Cameroon to ensure the construction of a better road on the National Road Number 3. Apocho National and General Camille Makoso also decried the disrespect shown to the corpse of Kabel Nanjim Nyamtom after he died due to a road accident on Thursday. Smagic and Gable compiled those reactions and came up with this report.
Two Ivorian influencers, Apocho National and General Camille Makoso, go furious on the social media platforms after getting the news about the death of their friend and brother, Gabriel Nyanjib Nyamtong. Apocho National and General Camille Makoso decried the disrespect shown to the lifeless body of Gabriel Nyanjib Nyamtong. The worst of all that I can't even talk is how people will be so courageous to use their mobile phones to film a dead person. There are people in Cameroon who have the talent and courage to become reporters with their phones until they film the nose of the dead. When DJ Arafat died, certain Ivorian journalists struggled to get the corpse of DJ Arafat, but I bet you they did not succeed.
Qui peut venir nous montrer le visage de DJ Arafat couché sur le bitume. J'ai dit aucune personne. Mais ce qui me fait mal ce soir.
What is making me feel bad is all of those who had courage to use their telephones to take images of the dead without covering on the body.
On prend son téléphone, on le filme, sans toutefois penser à sa famille, à ses amis, à ses proches.
For General Camille Makoso, people were not sincere towards Gabriel Nanjib Nyamtong. Let's be honest. People were very wicked towards Gabriel, a young Cameroonian filled with talent. During the World Cup, everyone was taking selfies with him. As they see him rising, they brought him down. He questions when the government of Cameroon will wake up from slumber to realize that the National Road Number 3 has taken so many lives already. How many people have died as a result of that road? From there, some precautions were supposed to be taken to stop the accidents on the road. Which minister are they waiting for him to die before taking an action? One of the most important persons in Cameroon has died because of that road. The death of Gabriel Nanjib last Thursday has remained a shocking news for his friends in Ivory Coast. It's in the most dramatic condition that he died. He made videos about the ugly state of road in Cameroon, warning users. The upcoming Africa Cup of Nations to be hosted by Ivory Coast was an opportunity for Apocho National to meet up with his friend Gabriel Nanjib Nyamtong, but unfortunately they won't see again. I was waiting for my friend during the AFCON, but unfortunately, he left 6 months to the AFCON. He told me he will be here during my concert to give me a support. Initially, at the mortuary of the regional hospital annex in Edea, the lifeless body of late Gabriel Nanjib Nyamtong was transported to his native Bangante village hospital mortuary late Thursday evening, pending funeral arrangements.
And may his soul continue to rest in peace. And now to something else. As the world commemorates the International Day of the African Child, Some parents in the city of Douala think children are exposed to online abuses like cyberbullying and sexual exploitation online. Our reporter, Asia Luciliengo, spoke to some parents and a psychologist on the challenges faced by children in a digitalized world and how it can be tackled. Her report.
Children in the digitalized world are exposed to some online abuses such as cyberbullying, online harassment, inappropriate content, amongst others. According to a global survey carried out, 1 out of 5 teens fall prey of cyberbullying. In Cameroon, many people think online platforms are not protected. Some platforms don't respect or consider what should be posted on their pages. Parents can follow up their kids always to maybe see the content of what they view. This influences the morale of a child. Others think children are not supposed to have access to phones at a tender age because they cannot differentiate what is good or bad. Children targeted by cyberbullying are at risk of psychological health effects like anxiety and depression. Psychologists say the government has a role to play to protect children against online abuses.
When it concerns a children or a child, it's not possible. What it concerns a child is not possible that this child can control what is happening to him. That is why it's important that the state should take in account this type of issue so that we can control exactly all the media that are running in our society so that we can have children that are protected from those type of things.
As Cameroon joins the international community to celebrate the International Day of an African Child, psychologists advise parents to have an open discussion with their kids by educating them on the importance of having safe and appropriate online behavior. Parents also have to educate their kids on what websites to use, software apps, and also check their profiles and posts. The theme of the 2023 edition of the International Day of an African Child is the rights of the child in a digital environment.
That's it for the first part of the news. Talking Point is up next. The quest to be the first to post images on social media has caused a lot of Cameroonians to lose some sort of empathy towards accident victims. This is due to the growing phenomenon of taking photos or images rather than saving the lives of accident victims, especially when they are agonizing. Health experts say they'll regret the act while cautioning the population that helping victims should be a priority as it can go a long way in saving lives. Today on Talking Point, I will be receiving a general practitioner known as Dr. Asobo Kankeng, and he will explain to us how persons on accident scenes could save lives by applying first aid measures. Good evening to you, Dr. Asobo. It's a pleasure having you on Talking Point today. So tell us, what should be the first reaction of a civilian when on an accident scene?
Thank you very much, Madam Fogwe, for having me. Hello to everyone. All right. In one circumstance, when you're actually faced with an accident context, you should always ask yourself a number of questions. But the first thing that you should always tell yourself is you're actually aiming to be proactive and not necessarily reactive. Meaning that there's no reason getting agitated in the context of the sight of blood or because of the trauma side. You need to actually settle down and then ask yourself a couple of questions, set a few very quick objectives as to how you're going to act and why. The first considerations that you're supposed to have are with respect to assessment and respect to triage as well. Assessment basically is just you being able to evaluate the situation, evaluate the people on the scene, and then determine how well you're going to actually respond to the needs that are present on site. And then the next now will be the triage, which actually should follow a very quick assessment, wherein you're struggling to actually attribute severity to each of the patients that are on the site, all the victims that are on the site, to know exactly which you should prioritize more and which you should actually be taking way more prompt action with.
Dr. Asobo, tell us, what are the most appropriate positions to place accident victims?
So the position of the patients is actually dependent on the findings of your quick assessment. The assessment process is actually dependent on an acronym that summarizes the entire process, A, B, C, D, E. It's actually a concept by which you're actually struggling to evaluate the patient's state, depending on some particular parameters, notably the state of the airways, the breathing, the circulation, disability, and then evaluation of the exposure that the patient has in a particular trauma context. So normally, every individual, be it a medical practitioner, be it a healthcare giver or not, should at least be able to exploit these three basic attributes, which is what? To look, to listen, and to feel. In the particular context of trauma, those are the major things that you should actually be able to consider. You evaluate by seeing, you actually struggle to listen, everything that you could get, and then now you struggle to feel as well. Now, when you're going by the ABCD, it's a systematic approach that you're actually observing, in which case, initially, you're struggling to actually evaluate the airways. You're going to struggle to understand whether or not the airways are patterned, whether they're free, whether there's any presence of a foreign body or anything which might actually be preventing the airways from being free in a particular context. You need to also check whether the tongue might not have actually changed its position and as such might be obstructing the passage of air in that particular context. Still during the evaluation of the airway, you need to actually be able to verify, first of all, the patient's integrity as far as the cervical lodge is concerned. In the context of trauma, there are lots of circumstances where the patient might actually have incurred a medullary trauma to the cervical region, that's a vertebral trauma to the cervical region, and then now would not benefit in any way from change of position. So in normal circumstances, your quick assessment during that airway phase will be checking out to see whether there's patency of airways, whether there's the presence of any foreign body, whether there are any lacerations that might have actually been incurred to the nasal cavity or even the buccal cavity in some context, and then now to verify for potential cervical injury. If you're actually faced with a patient who has cervical injury, it's going to be imperative to immobilize that patient and not dare to move him a notch. The major thing that you're going to do now is that you're definitely going to need assistance to actually work with that particular individual, because every step of the assessment process that you're actually following must actually be done with the patient being immobilized. As opposed to a patient, for instance, who is a victim of a specific accident, but you notice that he's actually able to displace himself or has shown possibility to actually mobilize themselves to a certain degree. In those patients now, you'll actually be going for the recovery position, which is what they call in French position lateral de sécurité. You struggle to place the patient now on left lateral decubitus with his arm actually extended behind his head, with now a need for him to actually rest on the said arm with the lying position now on his left side. So for that to be done, most times it's going to be ideal for you to actually adopt a specific or to position yourself with respect to the patient. If you're actually going to place that patient on PLS according to towards the left side, then you should be on his left side. If you're going to place that patient on his right side, then you should be on his right side. But definitely the right side always tends to be the more advised position to actually go with. Now, having already evaluated and known whether or not that patient is actually safe as far as the airways are concerned, you move now to the breathing. You're still going to exploit the look, the listen, and the feel. You're going to check, first of all, for the nature of his breathing. For that, of course, you might actually need to inspect the chest movements that go with respiration. You need to check for superficial breathing or excessively quick breathing, what they call tachypnea. You need to also check for the potential traumas at the level of the chest region, which could actually impede on chest movement and such would prevent the patient from actually breathing in an adequate manner. Likewise, if it is a possibility, you need to actually struggle to listen to see whether the sounds that you're getting are actually the normal sounds that somebody should be making when he's breathing. Definitely, if you're actually getting grunting or some specific kind of wheezing sounds, then there could be a problem somewhere. There might be a foreign body that is lodged within the airways, and as such, that patient might not be actually breathing as much as it should. Basically, your actions in that particular context will be based on what you've actually found. There's possibility for you to dislodge whatever foreign body is actually preventing him from breathing, then you definitely should. If you have a Gerdell's cannula, as we were discussing earlier, at your disposal, then you should actually struggle to actually maintain airway patency and see whether or not you could actually achieve breathing by that means. Of course, this is strictly in the context of a trauma or an accident scene where you don't have access to mechanical ventilation tools and all those things. In a context where you're dealing with an accident scene or a trauma scene, definitely you will not have access to the specialized equipment that should be used for the ventilation of patients, or for instance, in a context where you're struggling to actually make sure that the patient is benefiting from ventilation by some means. So in those particular contexts, you could only do as much as checking the airways, as making sure that if there's anything that you could do in that particular context, you actually struggle to do it. The next step that you address is the C, which actually deals with the circulation of the patient. You have now to struggle to understand whether hemodynamically the patient is actually relatively stable. It's true in the context of an accident, especially if it's an accident of real gravity, it's going to be so difficult for you to actually investigate or exploit that particular context. But the very same concepts that you are using, the look, the listen, the feel, are basically the things that you're going with. You're going to check to see whether the patient is actually presenting with any signs that would make you think that the patient might actually be losing blood, might be experiencing a hemorrhage. Are his extremities tending to be relatively clumpy and moist? Do you have the impression that he has cold extremities that might already be getting blue, or might literally be pale from a possible hemorrhage that he's experiencing? Likewise, you need to immediately actually check for the presence of the pulses, the peripheral pulses of this patient. If you actually know how to go about the peripheral pulses, you check for the presence of a carotid pulse, a radial pulse. In some particular contexts where you might have the lower limbs in touch, you will actually be checking for the peripheral pulses of the lower limbs. So basically, you assessing those particular elements to know whether or not the patient is receiving blood in all the actual anatomical constituents of the body is very key. It tells you already whether or not this patient is actually potentially getting into a form of shock, in which case he might be having an internal hemorrhage or even an externalized hemorrhage. It tells you also whether the patient might actually be warranting way more emergency care or attention than the other people on the scene.
Dr. Asobo, in some of these accident scenes, a lot of these patients usually ask for water. Is it advisable for one to give them water in such a situation?
It's a bit of a controversial question, but the answer at the point is going to be no. Because in the context of an accident, you don't know exactly what the victim has been affected by. And so you don't want to actually give the patient anything to eat or anything to drink, which will potentially actually lead to the patient actually inhaling the water, or the water going through a false route. You don't know whether there's actually been a trauma with perforation to the abdomen. You don't know whether there's actually been inhalation of foreign objects, or there's actually the presence of a foreign object within the airways, which is going to actually limit the patient's ability to breathe if you're actually occupying the mouth in that particular context.
Medical practitioner, I guess you have watched on TV how some accident victims are being handled. What are some acts you think are not beneficial to some of these victims?
Yes, it's definitely been the case. In the context of most accidents, we have the tendency as a population to actually see to panic and amazement, which is not supposed to be the case. In normal circumstances, when you're actually first responder to an accident scene, your considerations are, can I help this patient, or can I actually contact somebody who will be of help to the patient? It's very, very helpless and uncalled for to actually rush to the accident scene, or to move towards the patients, rather to actually make noise and instead call for chaos, as opposed to actually giving room for the people who are actually able to act, to face the scene and actually act in consequence. So I think that the habits that we usually have of using our phones and, crowding the whole scene, making it impossible for anybody who can actually help to do so, is not the best of things to actually do in the context of.
Talking about the first aid box, there are some basic items every driver needs to have in their first aid box. What are some of these items?
In normal circumstances, every first aid box should have minimum content, but it's important for you to have equipment that would first of all permit you to actually carry out CPR if it's needed. You should actually be able to have with you in your first aid box a Gedel's cannula in case you'd want to actually relieve an obstruction of the airway or partial swallowing of the tongue, and then to a certain extent also to maintain patency of the airways. It's also quite important for you to have basic things like gauze, like I guess betadine with spirit. You never know the context in which you would actually need to use those equipments. Sometimes it's also important for you to have anything with which you could actually use as a tourniquet to actually prevent massive bleedings where it's possible.
That accidents are very frequent on our highways. Don't you think people living in accident-prone areas should be trained by health experts on some of these safety measures?
Quite frankly, it's a measure which could be laudable, but it doesn't seem as being very feasible, because it's quite difficult, especially in the rural areas, to claim that you'll be able to train individuals on how to actually act in a more or less specialized way. On the contrary, it should be important that in every locality whatsoever, there be at least a station or a person or a group of persons to whom we know that we would actually be able to go to in the face of those kinds of incidents, or that we could actually contact, who would act as first responders and do as much as they can while waiting now for the actual paramedics to show up to the scene.
And according to you, whose duty is it to assign people on such tasks?
Well, in circumscriptions, we always have quarter heads, we actually have quarter leaders. Sometimes we could also even have traditional leaders. So it's necessary to actually earmark the people of influence in those particular localities, and then struggle to make sure that there are always going to be specific persons that have been identified either by the quarter heads, by the quarter leaders, or by the actual traditional leaders as being the people of choice to actually act in those particular contexts.
Now we take this last question. What's your thought about the trend of taking pictures and videos rather than saving lives of accident victims?
Actually, showing up to a trauma scene, showing up to an accident scene with a phone is first of all an act of bad faith, because there's nothing that you're actually going to benefit in that particular context by using or getting your phone to actually take snapshots. What is really, really very important is you actually using that phone to see how you could actually get in contact with anybody or any authorities that you know could be of potential help to the patients. And so it will be best if when you've noticed that it's an accident, you sort yourself away from the incident, from the crowd, and then you start making all necessary calls to ensure that the people who are in need, the victims in that particular context, are attended to in the most prompt manner possible.
Dr. Asobo Kankeng, general practitioner right here in the city of Douala. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your keen attention on today's edition of the 6 p.m. Primetime Newscast. Have a lovely evening in the company of more interesting programs on Equinoxe Television. So long.